My paradise was gone. That's what hit me first, a gut-wrenching certainty as I crested the hill and saw the chaos unfolding. A single, sharp scream had been the only warning. How could this be happening? My heart hammered a frantic rhythm against my ribs, a percussive beat of pure terror and disbelief. The scene unfurled like a nightmare. My little slice of heaven, my family's hand-built lake camp, was a wreck. A splintered mess of wood and canvas where my dock once stood, my beloved hammock torn to shreds, and a woman I now knew as the HOA president, Carol standing right in the middle of it all, a smug, triumphant smirk plastered across her face. "You're trespassing, young man," she declared, her voice a grating, saccharine sweet venom. The words were a physical blow. Trespassing? This was my land. She had a full-on tantrum, gesticulating wildly at a survey marker I hadn't even seen, her flailing arms like a deranged puppet's. "This entire section is common property," she bellowed, her face contorting into a mask of righteous fury. "And you've just destroyed it." Her eyes, cold and sharp as shards of ice, locked onto mine. The nerve. "We'll see about this. I've already called the authorities." A low, angry rumble of disbelief escaped my lips, a sound I barely recognized as my own. A young deputy, fresh out of the academy, pulled up in his patrol car a moment later. He was polite, confused, and utterly unprepared for the hurricane that was Carol. "Sir, ma'am, can we just all calm down and look at the paperwork?" he asked, his voice cracking slightly. I tried to explain, my words stumbling over the sheer absurdity of the situation. "Officer, I have the deed. This land has been in my family for 3 generations. This is not common property." But Carol was relentless. "He's lying. This is a public easement. His illegal camp has been an eyesore for years," she shrieked, pointing a manicured finger at me. My wife, Olivia, had been standing silently beside me, her hand clenched in mine, but at this she gasped. "Carol, that is a blatant lie." Olivia's voice trembled, but there was a fierce, protective edge to it. The deputy, overwhelmed, simply threw his hands up. "Look, I'm just gonna need to see the deeds." A day later, the world shifted. I had spent the night poring over my family's deeds, the old, brittle parchment smelling of dust and history. The land marker she had pointed to wasn't a survey marker at all. It was an old fishing stake my grandfather had put in decades ago. The real survey marker, buried under a pile of dead leaves, was a good 20 feet back, right on the edge of the lake, exactly where our property line ended. A triumphant, cold wave of realization washed over me. She hadn't just been mistaken. She had been deliberately, maliciously wrong. It was all a calculated performance, a cheap magic trick designed to steal what was mine. That night, sleep was impossible. I lay awake, a knot of fury and a burning desire for justice twisting in my stomach. The next morning, I drove into town, not to the HOA office, but to the county courthouse. A quick consultation with a property lawyer, an old friend of my dad's, and the gears of retribution began to turn. The twist came from an unexpected source, an old, dusty town charter. The lawyer, a wiry man named Ben who had a knack for finding buried secrets, discovered a clause from the 1920s. It specified a little-known, archaic local ordinance: any individual, or group, who intentionally misrepresents a property boundary to claim land they do not own, particularly in the case of a public easement, is liable for treble damages for any property destruction and is subject to a trespassing penalty on the true owner's land. The kicker: the HOA itself, as a legal entity, was on the hook. It wasn't just Carol's personal vendetta anymore. She had acted in her capacity as president, and now the entire association, and their carefully curated budget, was in my crosshairs. "Holy cow," Ben said, his eyes wide with a gleeful shock. "She didn't just mess with you. She messed with the law." The confrontation took place at the next HOA board meeting, a stuffy affair held in the community clubhouse. The air was thick with the faint smell of stale coffee and passive-aggressive floral arrangements. Carol, sitting at the head of the long table, was in her element, basking in the reflected glow of her self-perceived authority. She was in the middle of a self-congratulatory speech about cleaning up the community, her voice dripping with false concern. That's when I walked in, followed by Ben, a thick manila folder clutched in his hand. The room fell silent, a sudden, expectant hush. Carol's smile froze. "Oh, look who it is," she said, her voice laced with mockery. "The squatter." A small, nervous cough rippled through the room. Ben stepped forward, his expression grave. He cleared his throat. "Ladies and gentlemen of the board, I represent the owner of the lakefront property in question." He then proceeded to lay out the evidence, calmly and methodically. He showed them the original survey markers, the old deed, and finally, the damning clause from the town charter. The gasp that echoed through the room was not from me, but from the other board members. Their faces, a moment ago filled with polite indifference, now held a mixture of horror and dawning panic. Carol, on the other hand, was turning a brilliant shade of crimson. Her face was a storm of disbelief and rage. That's a fabrication," she stammered, her voice a thin, reedy squeak. "That document is a fake." Ben simply smiled, a thin, tight line. He produced a notarized copy from the folder. A collective groan went up from the board. The rest of the meeting was a blur of frantic whispers and panicked phone calls. Carol's allies, who had been so vocal in her defense a day earlier, were now scurrying away from her as if she were a carrier of some virulent disease. Her carefully constructed empire of petty rules and small-minded control was crumbling right before her eyes. The once dignified woman was now a frantic, cornered animal, her shouts of protest morphing into a desperate, tearful plea. "But I was just trying to protect the community. The value of our homes," she sobbed, her voice cracking under the weight of her own lies. Her pleas fell on deaf ears. The damage was done, the truth was out. The board, faced with the prospect of a massive legal judgment against the HOA, voted unanimously to strip her of her title and issue a formal apology. A week later, the restitution was delivered. It wasn't just the cost of my demolished camp, but 3 times the amount, a small fortune that was going to fund a brand new, custom-built, luxury-grade lakefront retreat. But the true victory was seeing Carol, a woman who had tried to steal my heritage and my peace, being forced to sign the check herself. As she pushed the paper across the table, her hand trembling, her eyes met mine. There was no rage there anymore. Only a hollow, defeated emptiness. My wife and I, now armed with a powerful story and a sizable budget, started planning. We weren't just rebuilding. We were building a legacy, a testament to what happens when you stand your ground against injustice. It was a beautiful, hard-won victory. Here's my question to all of you: was my retaliation a righteous act of justice, or did I go too far, exacting a revenge that was as spiteful as her initial offense? It's a fine line, isn't it? When is standing up for yourself a fight for justice, and when does it become a quest for retribution? Let me know what you think.